Hello, my name is Matthew. It's Andy. And today is day 7 for stories for my friend in quarantine. And today I'm going to tell you about my dear old friend Bob. Uh, my friend asked me to talk about him a little bit. And just yesterday, I saw that my little channel has gained 800 subscribers, so 800 people, which is really cool and gratifying. And also, my channel now has 200 videos, which is a lot of me talking. So, with I guess a milestone, I'm very happy to talk about my old friend Bob. It was a great impact on me, on my reading life, um, and a influence on my development in my formative years. And I met him when I was a teenager. I believe I was 18 or 19 years old, and I was in college taking a creative writing class. And I had written something. I don't even really remember, but I had um, a pretty finalized draft of my story, and I wanted to. I wanted to do a revision, so I decided to go to a coffee shop to kind of be out in public, but work on something alone. And I sat outside on this patio, and there's a whole group of people there. One was an old man and his two chocolate labs. But I sat down with my coffee and worked for an hour or two, whatever, um, going through making changes and making notes. Um, and the crowd dispersed. So all of a sudden, it's just me and this old man. I'm at one end and he's at the other end. And he calls me over. He yells. He goes, "What are you doing over there?" And I say, "I'm editing a paper." And he just goes, "Come here." So I go over, and there's not much pleasantries that are being exchanged. Um, so good looking. He just says, "Give me the paper." Takes my pen, and immediately he's making marks and scratching things out and putting annotations on top of what I've already done. So I was happy with what I had, and now here's this old guy that I've never met, isn't really talking to me, writing freely all over my paper. Uh, I don't normally use vulgarity on my channel. At some moments, it's kind of difficult to get around. Um, so some of these stories might involve a little bit of profanity. But he's sitting there looking at this thing, writing it, and he's muttering under his breath, and he's going like, "Jesus fucking Christ, like Jesus, what the fuck, Jesus fucking," that kind of that kind of thing. And he flips the page over, and it's been a while now, and I'm getting irritated. And I go like, what are you, a teacher, or what's going on here? And he looks at me, and he goes, "I'm an editor." And I go, "Carry on." And that was my first moment meeting this man. That night we sat together for hours. Uh, he might have spent just on his own an hour just going over my paper, and then we would talk about it, and then we started to get to know each other. And I remember like saying like, in general though, like, did you like the writing style? He would go, You see how on the first page you didn't use any commas? And then on the second page, it's completely full of commas? Because that's not good. Things like that, he was brutally honest, and immediately, it was immediately evident that he was intelligent. He was well spoken, commanding. When he talked about anything, it was interesting. Uh, I kept going back to this coffee shop, and I come to find out that large crowd of people there were regulars, and people knew each other at varying degrees of familiarity. And you could socialize or you could sit by yourself. Sometimes there would just be a whole large group of people. Um, Bob would be there with his two dogs. If it was up to him, he would happily just talk about his dogs, talk about his golf game, talk about recipes that he makes at home, and that would be it. But we would have lively discussions with a whole crowd of people, huge age range. I was 18 or 19, but there would be 14 or 15 year olds that are in high school, college kids, people in their 30s or 40s in school. Bob was retired, and you would have people in retirement age in their 60s or 70s or 80s, and we would all sit together and have an enjoyable time having discussions that can go any which way. But if someone's telling a story, whenever Bob told a story, the 14-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 19-year-old, the 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 50-year-old would all just sit back and listen, and it would be funny and witty. You would learn something. He'd be, in a way, could tell a story that a 14-year-old and a 60-year-old would both learn something. When he talked about books, which was my favorite, he did something that no one had done before for me. One was he spoke to me as a peer. Just we're on the same level, and didn't talk down to me. He would tell me that I'm stupid, but he wouldn't talk down to me. And he would say, like, you need to read Shakespeare. You need to read Dickens and Thomas Mann, and even more modern. You need to read Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Faulkner, and all the poets. Read Tennyson, read Browning, read the poetry of Thomas Hardy, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Blake, Byron, Keats, Shelley. Just read all of them. He would say things like, some of the greatest minds that ever lived, people that have shaped nations and eras, shaped the world, these people have been writing things down. You can share their thoughts, and it's available to you. It's at the bookstore. How are you going to have any reference point on your life if you're not going to read these books? You have to try. So that'd be one thing. But then he would talk about a book specifically. He would talk about David Copperfield. He could talk about it for 30 minutes. And the way that he would describe it, it would sound exciting. Like a really entertaining, funny, interesting book. In a way that any teacher that I've ever had failed to do. there was nothing about, well, this is a very serious work and it's very important, and you know, we weren't talking about anything on a curriculum. And when a teacher talks, sometimes you get a feeling that like they don't really like the book that they're talking about. So, and he was staggeringly, fiercely intelligent. His memory was unbelievable. He would recite poetry. He wouldn't recite lines or passages, but whole poems of Tennyson or Yeats. Just, and it would come up in conversation somehow. Something specific would get mentioned, like this Circus Animals Desertion by Yeats, and then he would recite it. I would say, like, are you memorizing these things, or what? What's going on? He would say, no, I read them. He just reads them, and he loves them. We got to know each other at the coffee shop, and we became friends. He moved to South Carolina, to a sleepy little southern town, and we kept a correspondence, and I visited him every year. In the summertime, I would drive down, and I would spend either a weekend or a week with him and his wife and their two dogs. And he would say, like, I'm not going to entertain you. I'll feed you in the morning, but you can go and do whatever you want. I'm not going to spend all week having to babysit you. He would say that, and then we would go to the local coffee shop and sit with his dogs and talk. 3 years ago, he died, and he was older, and there was nothing sad about it. There wasn't. It wasn't an unexpected tragedy. And I'll tell you a funny story. When we would go to the coffee shop, he would bring his New York Review of Books, that oversized periodical, and he would, he always had the latest subscription. He would sit and read it, and years and years go by, and he always has his paper. And one day, I get my own subscription. I mail the thing in or whatever, and my paper comes, and the New York Review of Books even had a very special shell that they would put over it. They would staple on, and it would say, like, "Congratulations, this is your first New York Review of Books." And so I pull up to the coffee shop, and Bob's there, and I'm just beaming, so excited. He's sitting there reading his paper, and I'm gonna come over with my paper, and I get out and I sit down. And I'm waiting for him to, like, look over, and I'm looking at him, and there's something funny about his paper. It's still oversized the way that the New York Review is, but the proportions are, like, slightly off, and the thing's open. And so, I got my New York Review, and he flips his paper to the front, and he is not reading the New York Review. It's the London Review of Books. I had never seen it. I didn't know what it was. I go, well, what's this? And he's got, like, this smirk on his face, and he goes, oh, this is the London Review of Books. And he goes, oh, I see you have the New York Review. That'll be okay for you. It's something like that. And I'll show you. I found a picture of him. So this is us at a like a cookout or something. Let's see. There we are. Look how cool we look. And you might not be able to tell from the picture, but we're actually having a very good time. So that's my old friend Bob. A few days after he had died, Robert Silvers died, and I didn't know who he was, but there was an obituary in the New York Review. Now I had a subscription, and he was the founding editor, the editor-in-chief of the New York Review, the New York Review of Books. And it turns out that he was this fiercely intellectual, generous person that, for a publication where you have a string of the best writers, experts in their field, some of the most knowledgeable people in all aspects of the history and culture of the world. And then you have one man that's helming all of this, and everyone not only relied on him, but trusted him. And my friend Bob wasn't the smartest man in the world, but he was to me. And this is just a few days after I learned that he had passed, and I'm now reading an obituary of, generally speaking, it's about a man that shares similar characteristics to my old friend. And his name was Bob, Robert Silvers, and my friend Bob. And I printed something out. Let's see. So this is from that article, and Joan Didion did a write-up. So this is Joan Didion on the recent passing of Robert B. Silvers. And I'm reading this in relation to my Bob. When I heard that Bob had died, I felt that the bottom had dropped out of my world. I should have been prepared, but I wasn't, because it seemed impossible. People like Bob don't die. We need them too much. And when I found this, I found that I wrote something myself. So I wrote this maybe 3 years ago. So this is my friend Bob. Bob, to me, you represented the best of a civilization that was rooted in the Enlightenment. It was my great and improbable fortune to know you. You made me a better person by pushing me to think better. For that, I am forever indebted and grateful. I will miss you, my friend. So that was in the New York Review of Books. Not what I wrote, but what Joan Didion wrote. And I'll tell you just one other thing that, now that we're kind of late in the video, I can maybe skirt by, but it has a bit of vulgarity, and it's just a funny story. I was visiting Bob, and one of our friends at the coffee shop, who was sort of a loud, energetic kind of person, knew all the people there. He knew that I was going down to visit Bob, and wanted me to ask, while I was down there, if at some point that person could come on their own, is Daphne. So I go down, and I'm sitting there with Bob, and I go, so-and-so wanted to ask if they could come down and spend a week with you. Bob goes who? And I say, well, it's so and so, and he's like, I don't know, I don't know. And I have to like describe this person that he should be memorable to him. And he goes, oh. I was, well, I mean, he's a fucked up guy, right? He goes, he's fucked up. And like, just matter of fact, truthfully, very frank, he's a fucked up guy. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, we're all a little. And he goes, no, forget it. I don't know if I should have. Anyway, I'll just show that picture again because it's so great. Here's my friend Bob. This might be the longest video I've made, maybe. So that's it. There's a lot of stories that I could tell, but it's just a general idea of who he was as a person to me, and the influence and effect that he had on me. He he encouraged me to read books. So I'll end it there. Um, Thank you for watching, and take care.